Everyone, Hannah here, and I'm going to be doing an overview of the Discussion Leader project. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the syllabus. For all of the different types of assignments you'll have this semester, there's always going to be information in the syllabus. So here you can see the overview of Discussion Leader project. It gives you information about signing up for a week. And it also tells you something about the submission process since this assignment looks a little different than other ones. So everyone should already have signed up for a week. And if you haven't, I will be assigning you a week later on, maybe in a few days. Okay. So you sign up using a Google spreadsheet, which is in a Google Docs folder for our class. And that folder also has a place for students to submit their PowerPoints, Prezi, and other related documents for this assignment. So be sure to upload that there. You'll also see that your material is due the Friday before your week starts. So if we get a calendar out, this is when our semester started, but weeks 1 and week 2 I'm covering. So potentially your first week as discussion leader could start on June 6th. If you're assigned to June 6th, this means you need to upload your discussion leader project material to the Google Doc folder by June 3rd, that Friday at 11:55 p.m. If you're doing week 4, your week starts June 13th. That means your material should be uploaded to Google Doc, that folder by June 10th at 11:55 p.m. So that hopefully provides some clarification in terms of when your discussion leader project is due. And of course, there are some nuances there based off of the week you signed up for. All right. So the next thing you'll want to do is you'll want to look at the rubric. If you go to our Laulima page, and I'm in student view, so this should more or less look like what your Laulima looks like. And you go to the resource tab, go to rubrics. You'll see since the last time I made videos, I have added some documents. So you now have a rubric for the power and control wheel assignment that's due week 3. Your reflection paper that's due week 2. There is an overview of how to write a 5-paragraph essay, which should be how you organize that assignment, as well as the rubric. The final paper, since that's not due until week 6, I won't be adding an actual rubric for the assignment until the end of week 2 or 3. That'll give you the chance to focus on some of the earlier assignments like the reflection paper and the power and control wheel. But the syllabus for your final paper, which is that literature review, that'll go live at the end of week 2 or 3, that rubric. However, you will see that there is one item in that folder, and that is a detailed overview of what you should include in a literature review, because I understand that not everyone may have done a literature review before, especially in the social sciences. So if you're unsure of what that should look like, feel free to go ahead and peruse that document to get a sense of what you'll be doing for your final paper. All right, and then finally, your project docs. This is all the documents related to your discussion leader project. There is an example assignment from another class. So it's a student submission, but it's for SOC 333, Survey of Criminology, not 446. So there's some nuances there, but I will go over those when I share that example PowerPoint with you in a second. And then there's a rubric. All right, so what does that rubric look like? Here is the rubric. You'll see you'll be graded off of your PowerPoint or Prezi. You can choose which type of medium you want to use. And then you should also have an interactive component, which I'll talk about in more detail in a second. From there, you'll get scored on content, organization, creativity and appropriateness. And then if you do the math there, that gets you to 48 points, but the assignment is worth 50. Because you also need to submit a short 1-page note. It's a note, not a paper, which means you don't have to write in full paragraphs and sentences. You can do bullet points, but essentially in your note, you'll be explaining how and why you organized your project the way that you did. So you might want to talk about why you chose the terms you did and the different components that you did, things like that. Okay. So then the example, I know that's what everyone's vying for. And I should say, if you go to, in terms of submitting the assignment, this is our folder that I shared with you. And most of you have already opened this folder so that you could add your name to the sign up sheet for discussion leader weeks. Go to that. You can see that there's also a folder for weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6. You'll go to your week, you'll go to new, file upload, and then this is where you'll choose your file, and that's how you'll upload the material for your discussion leader project. Okay. Now let's look at the example, the student example. Where did I put it? Here it is. Okay. So here you can see that the student PowerPoint is aesthetically pleasing. It follows a cohesive style and design. And the style and design also connects to the topic, which is neocolonialism. You can see that there's a roadmap, a table of contents, that sort of thing. That's something I always try and do too. So for our weekly lecture PowerPoints, you'll notice I have an agenda where I explain what I'll be covering. That's sort of what this table of content does. Okay, so the student is bringing in outside sources that are relevant to the topic that they covered. Here are some key foundational definitions related to the topics that were a part of that student's week. And you can see that for defining key terms, you don't have to go as in depth, and so you can include multiple key terms per slide. And you can see it's aesthetically pleasing. It's very clear what terms are being defined. The definitions are short and sweet and concise, and then there's little imagery and that sort of thing. And then for something that's really big and broad, like neocolonialism, more broadly speaking, that gets its own slide with a more detailed definition and information, right? Now here the student is providing bullet points and details, sort of an overview of the readings for that week. I want to point out that this slide does have a lot of words on it. Now there's a whole school of thought regarding how much words should be on slides, and it can differ based off of if it's a PowerPoint for a lecture versus a conference presentation and that sort of thing. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. If that's something you're interested in learning more about, there's a lot of information on the interwebs on this topic. If you're interested, I can send you a blog link where it's a content creator who specializes in how to design and style and organize PowerPoint slides. But I would have encouraged the student to break this particular slide up into 2 or 3 PowerPoint slides instead of 1, just because it can feel very overwhelming to your audience to have this much information on one slide. But it still is a good project in that the student is providing a good deal of information and a solid, concise overview of the readings and the content covered for this week. All right, now the student is also taking what's been learned through the weekly material and then applying it in a critical way to real world contemporary social issues. So here she's saying, hey, this sounds like impossible. How can we do a neocolonial framework in a contemporary setting? And so she's posing that question to the audience, thinking critically. In all of my classes, whether it's 333 or 446, I always want my students to go beyond being able to define and regurgitate what the authors of the readings are saying, what's being said in the videos we watch. I want you to be able to think critically about what we're learning, be able to define and discuss these issues and key terms in your own words, and then going one step further, applying this information to real world contemporary social issues. And so next, that's what she does. And so she's thinking contextually about stuff here in Hawaii, providing different frameworks and different ideas for what a neo-colonial future could potentially look like, and specifically here in the US and in Hawaii. Lots of imagery that fits with the topic. And then you'll notice so far for our class this semester, in addition to having my lecture PowerPoint, my video where I'm giving the lecture, and the readings for the week, I typically have a short video from YouTube as well. And so far for weeks 1 and 2 and 4, 4, 6, I've done crash course sociology videos because they do a really great job of providing an overview and summary of foundational sociological terms and things. However, I often utilize TED Talks in my class material as well. And so this student did just that. She looked at some different TED Talks related to neocolonialism, and then she chose one and included that on in her presentation. This link is dead, but it was a live link in her original submission. And then she poses some questions and gives you a little bit of information about the TED Talk. So when you go into watching it, you're sort of thinking about specific things. All right. And then she goes over some of the key ideas from that TED Talk, sort of summarizing them and giving more details about things like abolishing the police, self-determination, alternatives to capitalism, limit corporations, and some of these concrete ways in which we can think about neo-colonial futures. And again, just some more real-world practical solutions to what she's covered. Now, in my 333 class, I had students do activities. So this was the interactive component. For this, the student had some maps and had students doing interactive things regarding colonization and what things looked like in 1945, and doing some comparison there. So this is from 2018. Okay. And then ask and poses some critical thinking questions to students based off of those maps. This is something you can do. Another interactive thing students often do is they'll do a sort of quiz where they'll ask multiple choice true false questions of their classmates based off of the material they covered in their PowerPoint, or they'll do a definition matching activity. And so you can do that for your interactive component. However, since COVID, pretty much everyone has learned how to record themselves giving a lecture, giving a talk, even my students. So if you would prefer to do a recording of your lecture, how I do, you can have that be your interactive component where you're lecturing as if you're in front of a live audience. And so that's sort of you're simulating an interactive experience with an audience. And so those are your two options. So you can do the traditional interactive component where you're having students do some sort of exercise, quiz, activity, or you can record yourself giving your lecture and then make that viewable to your classmates. All right. And so just as a reminder, as far as the rubric goes, the PowerPoint Prezi will be graded for about half the points, and then your interactive component, which again can either be a recording of your lecture or an interactive activity where you've come up with quiz questions and students are actually interacting and commenting in Google Docs about your interactive component. Those would be the two ways in which you're graded for this assignment. And then finally, the short one-page note. So I hope that this document, this video provides clarification and gives you a more concrete idea of what your discussion leader project should look like. Those will start being posted to Laulima as early as the Monday of week 3. And I look forward to seeing them. I'm sure classmates do as well. Have a great week, everyone.